All right, so you've shared these excerpts with us from The Spiritual Laws and Lessons of the Universe. And wow, we've got some pretty major spiritual figures weighing in here. Lord Michael, Saint Germain, Sananda, and Druthea.
Right.
So in this deep dive, we're going to unpack the core spiritual laws and lessons that they lay out, see what makes them unique, and then kind of think about how they might resonate with your life.
Mm,
Ready to jump in?
absolutely. You know, the thing that strikes me right away is how it really sets this foundation of balance as like the overarching principle for like all of creation. It's not just like a nice to have, but this sort of all-encompassing law, and aligning with the laws of creation is actually the highest command. But like right after that, it says to honor God as ruler of humanity and adhere to his laws.
Yeah, it's interesting how it sets up that cosmic order. And I like how it doesn't just say like, believe this or, this is it. It actually encourages you to question things and to seek out truth for yourself.
Right, and not just that, but to question everything, like even information itself. You know, the book really stresses discernment, making sure that you're verifying what you take in and that you really dig into the source of information.
It's like fact-checking your spiritual beliefs,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So speaking of those beliefs, this book lays out 18 spiritual laws, which feel like an expansion on the Ten Commandments, wouldn't you say?
Oh, definitely an expansion. And there are some very, very interesting interpretations in here. Like take idolatry, for example. You know, when you think about idolatry, most people think about statues and idols and things like that. But the book takes it a step further, and it talks about how the pursuit of wealth and possessions can actually be a form of idolatry in this modern age, and that it can push God out of his rightful place within a person.
Oh, that's really interesting. It makes you really look at your own priorities, doesn't it?
Yeah, and then you've got adultery. It talks about adultery as the sacred commitment, not just to your partner, but to the Father within.
Okay.
So infidelity becomes a violation of that deeper spiritual bond.
That really elevates the whole concept of marriage.
Absolutely. And then you have stealing, which also has a fascinating treatment. It's not just about the taking of physical things. It delves into this concept of the stealing of innocence.
Right, stealing someone's trust, their sense of security,
Ex-
their joy.
Yeah.
That's just as bad as stealing anything physical.
Oh, absolutely. And the book is very clear in its condemnation of any form of slavery. It really emphasizes that inherent equality of all humans as a fundamental law of God, regardless of your race or social standing.
It's a powerful reminder that everyone deserves respect and dignity.
Absolutely.
Okay, get ready, because this is where it gets interesting. The book talks about the Antichrist, but not as like this big external figure, but more like an internal force.
Exactly.
What is that all about?
It describes the Antichrist as this internal force that opposes God within each of us. It preys on our weaknesses, on our fears, and it uses deception and manipulation to try to steer us away from God.
And it lays out his tactics.
Yes.
I mean, it really doesn't hold back.
Right.
And one of the ones that really struck me was how it talks about how the Antichrist will try to rob you of the present moment. So you're either stuck regretting the past or you're paralyzed by fear of the future. And so you never really get to fully experience the now.
And that is so important because think about it, how often do we let these thoughts and these emotions completely control us, and they prevent us from being present in our lives? The book also talks about how the Antichrist encourages these feelings of inferiority or superiority, which leads to this constant cycle of competition and self-doubt.
That's exhausting, just even thinking about that.
It is. You're either putting yourself down or you're putting other people down, and there's no winning in that game.
Yeah, there's no peace in that.
Yeah. Exactly. And then, of course, there's the blame game. You know, the Antichrist loves to have us blaming other people, and it feeds into that victim mentality, that feeling that we're not responsible for our own actions and experiences.
That's so easy to do, though.
It is.
It's like, oh, it's not my fault, it's their fault.
Right. It's everyone else's fault but our own, and that type of thinking will keep us stuck.
Yeah, that's not going to get you anywhere.
Right. And then, of course, we can't forget about the allure of material possessions and that worldly success that so many of us are chasing after.
Yeah.
So the Antichrist uses those things to fuel our avarice and our pride, and it pulls us further and further away from a genuine spiritual path.
Which, I mean, that brings us right back to idolatry, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
It's like those material things become our idols.
Yes, and we end up worshiping them instead of God.
Okay, so speaking of pitfalls on the spiritual path, let's get into the book's take on the 7 deadly sins.
Yes.
We might not be able to get to all of them, but let's start with a few that I think might really resonate with people.
Pride, for example.
Yeah,
I feel like this is a big one, especially these days.
it is.
It's like this whole culture of self-promotion and Social media just seems to breed a certain level of pride. So how does this book define pride?
Well, it talks about how pride is really a lack of humility, and it's that inflated sense of self-importance that you were just talking about. So arrogance, vanity, that constant need for external validation, those are all symptoms of pride,
It's like a checklist for egotism, right?
pretty much.
Okay, so what about avarice?
Avarice.
What's the book's perspective on that one? So avarice goes right back to idolatry. It's that insatiable desire for more. More possessions, more wealth, more power, you name it. The book really cautions us that this chase for those external things can actually lead to spiritual emptiness.
It's true. It's like that saying, you can't take it with you.
Exactly.
This book seems to be advocating for finding fulfillment from something deeper, something more lasting than material wealth.
Yes, and it's not to say that wealth in and of itself is bad or wrong. It's the attachment to it. It's that belief that it holds the key to our happiness.
Yeah, and it doesn't.
It doesn't.
All right, let's talk about lust. Does it talk about that one?
It does. The book defines lust as an unnatural, excessive physical desire. And it really draws a distinction between lust and genuine love.
It's like reducing someone to an object of desire instead of recognizing their inherent worth, their divine spark.
Exactly. And lastly, let's touch on fear. The book is very clear that fear is a weapon. It's a weapon that is wielded by the Antichrist to control us and manipulate us, and it keeps us from stepping into our true potential.
It keeps us small, keeps us playing small.
Yes, it keeps us in our comfort zone even when we know that we're capable of so much more.
So then it encourages us to confront those fears.
Yes, confront those fears head on, see through the illusions, and ultimately choose faith over fear.
Such a powerful message.
Yeah.
So we're talking about challenges and pitfalls and everything.
Yeah.
Where does personal responsibility fit into all of this? Does the book address that?
It does. In fact, it's very central to the book's message. It makes it very clear that you are responsible for your own actions and your own experiences. You are the architect of your own reality.
No more playing the victim.
Exactly. It even goes so far as to say there are no victims, only volunteers.
Whoa, okay, that's a big statement.
It is a big statement, and it might seem harsh at first, but it's really about empowerment. It's about owning your choices and recognizing your role in creating your life.
I like that. So connected to that is this idea of karma. How does the book talk about karma?
So it describes karma as a natural law of cause and effect,
All right.
but it emphasizes the immediacy of it.
Oh, so it's not like this debt hanging over you from a past life? Or...
And not according to this text. It's about the instant consequences of your actions, the ripples that flow out from every choice that you make.
They're kind of freeing in a way. Like
Yeah.
you mess up, you learn, you move on.
Yeah.
You don't have to carry around all this baggage and guilt and...
Right. It's about recognizing the lesson and then giving yourself permission to move forward.
Okay, so we talked about personal responsibility, but what about our relationship with the material world in general? What does that have to say about that?
There is a definite call to detach from material possessions and from all those worldly desires that we've been talking about. It's presented as a crucial step in achieving spiritual freedom and unity with God.
And it's so countercultural, especially in this day and age. Like everything in our society is telling us to buy more, do more, be more.
It is. It's very much a consumer-driven society. This book is really encouraging a simpler path, one where our fulfillment comes from within and not from accumulating more stuff.
It makes you think about how often we seek happiness in things that ultimately can't provide it.
Absolutely. And again, it's not about rejecting the material world entirely, but it's changing our relationship to it. It's recognizing that true happiness comes from within, from that connection with God, and not from the things that we own.
It's about finding that joy in those simpler things in the present moment and in those deeper connections.
Exactly. And this message isn't unique to this book.
Right.
This idea of simplifying our lives and releasing that attachment to material possessions and focusing on our inner world, that's a very, very common thread that runs through many different spiritual traditions.
Yeah, it's like a universal truth.
It is. It is. It's a universal truth. Now, as we start to kind of wrap up our deep dive into this book, I think it's important to remember that these are just excerpts, right? We're only getting these glimpses into a much larger body of work.
Yeah, and I think ultimately it's up to each person listening to kind of decide what resonates with them, how these teachings might apply to their own lives, and if it's something that they want to explore further.
Absolutely.
I don't know about you, but it's been pretty thought-provoking so far.
Yeah, definitely. One of the biggest takeaways for me is that focus on really nurturing that personal relationship with God and not some distant judging figure,
Right.
but as this loving presence that resides within each of us.
It's about that connection, that inner knowing,
Yeah.
where you find true guidance and wisdom and strength.
Exactly. And the book encourages you to really look inward, to tune into that inner voice of God and trust that wisdom to guide your choices and your actions.
And I think there's also a big emphasis on self-awareness. Really being honest with yourself about your strengths and your weaknesses, and taking responsibility for your choices.
Yes, because true spiritual growth comes from within. It comes from doing that inner work, not from chasing external validation or those material possessions that we were talking about earlier. It's about aligning our actions with our values and striving to live a life that really reflects our highest self.
It's about integrity and compassion and just that respect for all of creation.
And recognizing that interconnectedness, understanding that our actions have ripple effects that reach far beyond ourselves.
And we can't forget the power of choice,
Yes.
which this book seems to highlight again and again,
It does.
that in any given situation, you have a choice in how you respond.
Exactly. Fear or faith, love or hate, forgiveness or resentment, the choice is always ours. And those choices ultimately shape the course of our lives.
It really is empowering when you think about it like that.
It is.
That we're not just these victims of circumstance, but that we actually have a hand in creating our own reality.
We have the power to choose a more fulfilling and a more meaningful path.
And speaking of that, this book leaves us with a very thought-provoking statement. There are no victims, only volunteers.
Wow. It's a powerful statement, isn't it?
It is.
It really challenges us to examine our perceptions of free will and the very nature of our experiences.
Yeah, I mean, if we take it literally, it's suggesting that on some level we've chosen every experience in our lives,
Right.
even the difficult ones.
Yeah.
What do you make of that?
It's a radical idea when you really think about it. It
Yeah.
makes you question everything you thought you knew about fate and destiny and even the nature of reality itself.
And maybe that's the point.
Right.
Maybe it's inviting us to dig a little deeper and challenge those assumptions and explore the mysteries of existence from a new perspective.
It's a call to awaken to our own power, to take ownership of our choices,
Yeah.
and to create a life that aligns with our truest, most authentic selves.
Well, I have to say, this has been quite a journey.
It has.
And to think this all came from your curiosity about this book.
It's amazing what we can uncover when we do a deep dive like this.
It really is.
It is.
And for you listening, we hope that this deep dive has sparked some of your own curiosity
Yeah.
and inspired you to maybe explore some of these concepts a little further on your own.
These are important things to think about.
They are.
They are. And remember, this is your journey. It's your path to forge.
Take what resonates, leave what doesn't.
Exact.
Trust that inner compass.
Yes. Trust
Yeah.
your own inner wisdom.
This has been great. Until next time.
It has been a pleasure.